Imagine spending your whole life searching for something you believed was somewhere outside of you, only to discover that what you were looking for was never truly separate from you. Imagine praying, seeking, following traditions, and searching for answers while the very truth you long for has been quietly present within your own awareness all along. What if everything you were taught about spirituality only represents the outer layer? What if Jesus was not simply teaching a religion, but revealing something much deeper, something that could completely transform the way you understand yourself, reality, and the mystery of existence? In this video, we will explore a hidden dimension of Jesus' teachings, a message that has been overlooked, simplified, and misunderstood for generations. Stay until the end, because the final realization may be the most powerful one, and it could change the way you look at life forever. If this message speaks to you, consider subscribing to Faithful Jesus, leaving a like, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps this message reach people who are searching for deeper understanding. Now let us begin. There is a reason the teachings of Jesus have continued to inspire humanity for thousands of years, while still being deeply misunderstood. Many people view Jesus mainly as the founder of a religious tradition, a teacher who created a system built around beliefs, practices, and institutions. But what if that interpretation only reveals a small part of the picture? What if Jesus was not directing people toward an external structure, but toward an inner awakening? Some scholars, including Elaine Pagels in her studies of early Christian writings and Gnostic traditions, have explored interpretations of Jesus' message that focused on inner knowledge, what the ancient Greeks called gnosis. This was not simply about accepting ideas or following rules. It was about direct understanding, personal experience, and inner realization. This idea also connects with the work of Carl Jung, who explored the human psyche and the process of becoming whole. Jung suggested that true transformation does not come only from accepting outside beliefs, but from discovering and integrating the deeper parts of ourselves. Jesus often spoke through parables, not because he wanted to hide the truth, but because some truths cannot be reached through the mind alone. When he said, "Those who have ears, let them hear," perhaps he was pointing toward a different kind of listening, not just hearing words, but becoming aware. Because beneath the language of religion, there may be a deeper message about consciousness, identity, perception, and awakening. And this is where everything begins to change. If Jesus was teaching about a transformation of consciousness, then perhaps religion was never meant to be the final destination. Perhaps it was a doorway, a symbol, a reflection pointing towards something much greater. So ask yourself this question. If the truth was never truly outside of you, why were you taught to search for it there? And what happens when you stop endlessly searching and begin observing the awareness that is already present within you? This is where the deeper teaching begins. There is something incredibly subtle about the way Jesus communicated. He rarely gave simple answers. Instead, he constantly redirected attention, away from external things and toward the inner world. He said, "The kingdom of God is within you." Not within buildings, not within institutions, not within rituals alone, within. But what does that truly mean? If you deeply reflect on these words, you may begin to realize that Jesus was not describing a physical location. He was revealing a state of being, a level of awareness beyond ordinary thought, beyond the identity you have created, and beyond the limitations you have accepted. Centuries later, thinkers like Meister Eckhart expressed a similar idea, speaking of a divine presence within the soul, something untouched by circumstances, something deeper than the surface self. But this is where many people miss the essence of the message. They try to analyze it instead of experiencing it. They transform it into a theory instead of allowing it to transform their lives. They create structures around it instead of allowing it to dissolve the illusions within themselves. Jesus did not simply call people to admire him. He called them to follow the path he revealed. And following does not only mean worship, it means becoming. It means walking a similar path of awareness, learning to see reality from a deeper perspective. Because what Jesus revealed was that the identity most people defend, their fears, labels, memories, roles, and attachments, may not represent the deepest truth of who they are. Carl Jung described this outer identity as the persona, the mask people create to move through the world. But beneath that mask exists something deeper, something quiet, something aware, something that observes everything. This is where Jesus was directing people, not toward another belief system, but toward the freedom that comes when false identities begin to fall away. This is why his teachings were so challenging. They did not strengthen the ego, they questioned it. When Jesus said, "Whoever wants to follow me must deny himself," he was not speaking about destroying yourself. He was pointing toward going beyond the limited version of yourself that you have always believed you were. So consider this question. If everything you call yourself, your name, your history, your fears, your achievements, your memories, is something you can observe, then who is the one observing it all? Who are you beyond the story you have been carrying your entire life? Because the moment you stop completely identifying with your thoughts and begin simply observing them, something inside you starts to transform. A space appears, a quietness emerges, and within that silence, something ancient and deeply familiar begins to awaken. And this is where the teachings of Jesus move into an even deeper mystery. There is a reason Jesus repeatedly spoke about seeing. He asked questions like, "Do you have eyes but fail to see?" At first, it may sound like he was speaking about ordinary vision, but the meaning goes far beyond physical sight. He was speaking about perception, the way you experience and interpret reality every single moment. Most people believe they see the world exactly as it is. But in reality, they see it through countless layers, their past experiences, beliefs, fears, memories, and conditioning. What they call reality is often a reflection shaped by the mind. This idea has been explored throughout history. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant suggested that human beings do not experience reality in its pure form, but rather through the structure of their own perception. Modern psychology also recognizes that the brain does not simply record the world like a camera. It actively processes and constructs our experience of it. And Jesus pointed toward this mystery long before modern explanations existed. He said, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light." These words carry a deeper meaning. When your perception is divided by fear, judgment, and confusion, your experience of life becomes clouded. But when your awareness becomes clear and undivided, something changes, not necessarily in the outside world, but within the way you experience it. Because the reality you live in is deeply connected to the state of your consciousness. This is why two people can face the exact same situation and walk away with completely different experiences. One person sees hardship and only pain. Another sees the same challenge and discovers growth. One sees uncertainty and fear. Another finds purpose and meaning. So perhaps the deeper question is not simply, what is reality? Perhaps the real question is, how am I seeing reality? And this is what makes Jesus' message so powerful. He was not only telling people to change their external circumstances, he was calling them to awaken their perception, to remove the inner filters, release the illusions, and learn to see clearly. This echoes teachings found in other wisdom traditions as well. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come only from what happens, but from our attachment, interpretation, and relationship with what happens. Different cultures may use different words, but they often point toward a similar discovery. If your perception shapes your experience, then everything you feel, fear, and struggle with passes through the lens of your own consciousness. So ask yourself, if you could see life without fear, without judgment, and without distortion, what would reality look like? And even more importantly, who would you be in that experience? Because the next stage of this journey is not about changing what you see. It is about discovering who is doing the seeing. And that realization changes everything. As you go deeper into this path, you begin to notice something subtle, something that was always there but rarely recognized. There is a space between you and your thoughts. At first, it may only appear for a brief moment, a small gap where you are no longer completely lost inside the constant movement of the mind. Instead, you are watching. You are aware of what is happening within you. And this is where a profound shift begins. Because if you can observe a thought, then you cannot be only that thought. If you can notice fear, then you are more than that fear. If you can witness emotions rising and passing away, then there is something within you that remains present through all of it. Something steady, something aware. Throughout history, many spiritual traditions have pointed toward this deeper awareness. In Eastern philosophy, it is often described as the witness, the pure awareness that exists before the stories and identities created by the mind. In modern teachings, it is sometimes described as presence, the ability to fully exist in the awareness of the present moment. And centuries earlier, Jesus pointed toward this same mystery when he spoke of a deeper identity beyond the world of appearances. When he said, "I am," the meaning goes beyond a personal statement. It points toward a deeper reality of being, a presence that exists beneath the changing experiences of life. Not your body, not your personality, not your memories, not the story you have created about yourself, but the awareness that witnesses all of these things. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of his teachings. Jesus was not only revealing something about himself, he was pointing toward a truth about consciousness itself, the same awareness that exists within every person, quietly observing thoughts, emotions, and the unfolding journey of life. This is why moments of stillness can feel so powerful. In those moments, you experience something beyond achievement, beyond effort, beyond becoming. You simply experience being. Yet most people do not remain in that space for long. The mind quickly returns with its questions, fears, desires, and need to label everything. And once again, attention becomes trapped in the endless stream of thoughts. But what if that awareness, the quiet presence beneath the noise, is exactly what Jesus was revealing? What if awakening is not about gaining something you do not have? What if it is about recognizing something that has been present all along? This idea also connects with the writings of thinkers like Alan Watts, who explored the illusion of the separate self and suggested that the identity we defend so strongly may be more like a temporary role than a permanent reality. So consider this. If there is something within you that can observe your thoughts, your emotions, and your experiences, then who are you really? Are you the thoughts themselves? Or are you the awareness that sees them? When this question moves beyond intellectual curiosity and becomes something you directly experience, you begin to step beyond the illusion of a limited self and enter a deeper understanding of existence. And what comes next challenges one of the strongest beliefs we hold about who we are. Because there comes a moment, quiet, subtle, almost invisible, when the image you have built of yourself begins to loosen. Not because someone forced you to change, not because you accepted a new idea, but because you finally began to see clearly. And when that happens, you discover something surprising. The self you have spent your life protecting, defending, and constantly improving is not as permanent as you once believed. It changes. It adapts. It is shaped by situations, relationships, memories, and time. But something deeper remains. This is something ancient wisdom traditions have pointed toward for centuries. The self that most people identify with is not a permanent, unchanging thing. It is something created, a story constantly being rewritten through memories, experiences, beliefs, and perception. The philosopher David Hume suggested that when we search for a fixed self, we only find a collection of changing thoughts, feelings, and experiences. There is no single, unchanging identity that remains exactly the same through every moment. Modern neuroscience has explored a similar idea, showing that our sense of self does not exist in one isolated location, but emerges from many different processes working together within the brain. But Jesus approached this mystery from a completely different perspective. He did not simply explain the nature of the self. He invited people to move beyond it. Whoever loses his life will find it. At first, these words seemed confusing, even impossible. Why would losing your life lead to finding it? But the life Jesus spoke about losing was not your physical existence. He was pointing toward the attachment to the identity you have created, the image you protect, the labels you carry, the story you constantly repeat, and the desire to control how the world sees you. And this is where fear appears. Because if you are not only your identity, then what remains? What is left when the story becomes quiet? There is silence. There is presence. There is awareness. And for many people, this can feel like emptiness, but it is not emptiness. It is openness. It is the space where something deeper can be revealed. Something that was never created by circumstances, never limited by the past, and never dependent on external validation. This is why awakening can feel like a loss before it feels like freedom. You begin to lose your old certainty. You begin to release the need to control everything. You begin to see through the illusion of a fixed and permanent self. But within that letting go, you discover something that was never built and therefore can never truly be taken away. This is what makes Jesus' message so powerful and challenging. He was not teaching the ego how to become more powerful. He was revealing a reality beyond the ego. Not a way to create a better version of the person you think you are, but a way to recognize what exists beyond that person. So ask yourself, if everything you call yourself is constantly changing, then what is it that remains? What has been present through every experience of your life? What has watched every thought, every emotion, every success, and every struggle? Because when you begin to recognize that, something shifts. You are no longer simply caught inside your life. You begin to witness it. And from that place, a different kind of freedom begins to appear. A freedom that was never meant to be controlled. A freedom that was meant to be lived. There is a strange paradox about freedom. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control everything: their future, their reputation, their relationships, and the outcomes they desire. They believe that if they can control enough things, they will finally experience peace. But the opposite often happens. The more tightly you try to hold on to life, the more fear and tension you create within yourself. This is where one of Jesus' most misunderstood teachings becomes deeply meaningful. Do not worry about tomorrow. At first, it may sound like simple advice, but it is far deeper than telling people to ignore responsibility or stop planning. Jesus was pointing toward freedom from the illusion that the mind can guarantee the future. He was inviting people to return to the only moment where life truly exists, now. Think about how often the mind leaves the present moment. It returns to old regrets, creates future fears, and constantly imagines situations that have not happened. Philosophers such as Kierkegaard and Sartre explored how human anxiety often comes from being trapped between what has already happened and what might happen next, instead of fully experiencing the present. Modern psychology also recognizes how the mind constantly predicts, prepares, and worries about possible futures. But Jesus offered another way. He invited people to step beyond this constant mental projection and experience life directly. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. These words are not a message about becoming passive or doing nothing. They are about living in alignment,
allowing action to come from clarity instead of fear.
When you are fully present, you are no longer reacting only from old conditioning, fear, and endless analysis. You begin to act from awareness, from understanding, from a place that does not need to force life or fight against it. This is similar to what Taoist philosophy describes as Wu Wei, effortless action, moving with the natural flow of existence rather than constantly resisting it. Different traditions, different languages, but a similar realization. Jesus was not teaching people to escape life. He was teaching them how to experience life without the heavy burden of fear and control. And yet, this remains one of the hardest things for people to practice because the mind constantly pulls attention away from the present. It takes you into memories. It takes you into expectations. It takes you into endless imagined possibilities. So ask yourself, how much of your life are you actually experiencing? And how much of your life are you spending inside thoughts about what happened or what might happen? The moment you become aware of this pattern, you begin to step outside of it. Even a single moment of awareness can reveal a completely different way of existing, a way of living that is not controlled by fear, but guided by presence. And what Jesus revealed next takes this understanding even further, into a realization so profound that it begins to dissolve the boundary between yourself and the world you experience. At the deepest level of his teachings, there is something even more radical waiting to be understood. Something even deeper lies beyond identity, beyond perception, and even beyond the experience of presence itself. It is the realization that separation was never as real as it appeared.
Because as long as you experience yourself as completely separate from life, conflict naturally follows.
There is conflict between you and others, between you and the world around you, and even within yourself. But Jesus pointed toward something far more profound. I and the Father are one. For centuries, many have understood this statement as something unique and exclusive, something that separated Jesus from humanity. But what if the deeper meaning was not about superiority, but about unity? What if Jesus was revealing something about the nature of consciousness itself? Mystics from many traditions have described a similar realization. In Sufi teachings, it is expressed as union with the divine. In Advaita Vedanta, it is the understanding that the individual's self and ultimate reality are not truly separate. Philosophers like Baruch Spinoza described God not as a distant being outside of existence, but as the very essence and substance of everything that exists. If this is true, then the boundary you feel between yourself and the world may not be as solid as you believe. Everything you experience, every sound, every sensation, every emotion, every thought, appears within the same field of awareness. So where does separation actually exist? Is it within reality itself? Or is it created by the way we perceive reality? This is the mystery Jesus continued to point toward. Not a distant God somewhere far away, not something you must chase or achieve, but a presence that is already here. Something to recognize rather than something to obtain. Yet the mind naturally resists this understanding because the idea of separation feels so familiar. It creates the sense of me and everything else. It builds identity, comparison, competition, and fear. But when that illusion begins to dissolve, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to lose its foundation because there is no longer a completely separate other to defend yourself against. Comparison begins to weaken because the need to prove yourself against others starts to disappear. And a deeper peace begins to emerge. Not because the world has suddenly changed, but because the way you experience the world has transformed. So ask yourself, if there is no ultimate separation, then what is your relationship with everything around you? Are you simply a small part of reality? Or are you the awareness in which reality itself is experienced? Because the next step is not only understanding this idea, it is living from it. And when this understanding begins to take root, life no longer feels like something happening against you. It begins to feel like something moving through you. This subtle shift changes everything. When you no longer see yourself as separate, your actions no longer come primarily from fear. They begin to arise from clarity, compassion, and a deeper intelligence that does not come from constant thinking, but from awareness itself. This is why Jesus placed such importance on love. Love your neighbor as yourself. At first, these words may sound like a simple moral command, but hidden within them is a much deeper truth. Notice that he did not say, love your neighbor as someone completely separate from you. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. This only makes complete sense if, at the deepest level, there is a connection beyond separation. What you do to another, you are also affecting yourself, not merely as an idea, but as a consequence of the unity that connects all life. This is why genuine compassion cannot be forced. It naturally appears when the illusion of separation begins to fade. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer recognized this, suggesting that compassion emerges when we recognize ourselves in others. Modern neuroscience has also explored how humans are biologically capable of resonating with the experiences of those around us. Different fields, different explanations, but they point toward a similar discovery. Connection is not something we create, it is something we uncover. Yet many people try to love from the level of the ego. They love through expectation, through attachment, through the fear of losing something. But that is not the deepest form of love. When awareness expands, love becomes something entirely different. It becomes a way of being. It no longer depends on conditions or circumstances. It flows naturally from presence itself. And this is where the message of Jesus reaches a level that many people overlook. He was not simply teaching people how to act. He was revealing what a person becomes when they awaken. So ask yourself, is love something you offer from time to time? Or is love something that exists as your very nature? Because the final step in this journey is not about collecting more information. It is about recognizing something that has always been true. There comes a moment when the endless search begins to quiet down. Not because you discovered every answer, but because you finally realize you may have been asking the wrong questions. For so long, people search outside themselves, through teachings, systems, traditions, and interpretations created by others. They believe truth is somewhere distant, somewhere they must eventually reach. But what if the final realization is completely different? What if there was never anywhere you needed to go? Nothing you needed to become, nothing you needed to add, only something you needed to remember. Jesus did not come merely to create followers of a religious system. He came to awaken a direct realization, a living awareness that what you are at your deepest level is not separate from truth, not separate from life, and not separate from what many call God. The kingdom of God is within you, not simply as a metaphor, but as an invitation to recognize a reality that is already present. Because what you have been searching for is the very awareness experiencing these words right now, silent, present, unchanging, and yet often unnoticed. This is why, in the deepest moments of understanding, teachings begin to fall away, concepts lose their power, identities become lighter. The need to hold on to ideas begins to disappear. Because truth is not something you possess, it is something you are. Philosophers like Jiddu Krishnamurti spoke about this through the idea that truth cannot be contained inside a fixed path or system. It cannot be reduced to a structure that someone else gives you. And this reflects what Jesus was pointing toward all along. Not blind belief, not simply following a doctrine, but direct experience, a truth discovered within. So let me leave you with one final question. If everything you have been searching for has always been within you, what is truly left to find? And what happens the moment you stop searching and simply become aware? In that moment, without force and without struggle, you may begin to recognize something profound. A stillness, a presence, a quiet knowing that does not need approval or validation. From that place, life stops being a problem that must be solved. It becomes a mystery to be experienced. Not through fear, but through awareness. Not through resistance, but through clarity. And perhaps this was the deeper message Jesus was revealing all along. Not merely religion, not merely doctrine, but consciousness itself, alive within you, waiting not to be discovered, but to be remembered.